Chen, you're first. Tell us a little bit about yourself in 2 sentences or less, and we'll move on down the line.
Are you joining us on the panel? Oh, good. Because I thought I'm going to be in the panel with 3 lawyers, and then that's going to be the best time of my day. My name is Dr. Chen Liu. I'm assistant professor in finance from Trinity Western University. I'm also CFO of a blockchain startup, Coinchain Capital. We do blockchain solutions for companies.
My name's Ben Samaroo. I'm general counsel at First Coin Capital. We're based in Vancouver, an ICO advisory firm. We're in the process of merging with Galaxy Digital out of New York, and they're focused on digital asset management, cryptocurrency exchanges, and principal investing in blockchain companies.
My name is Blair Hogg. I'm Vice President General Counsel at the Vanbex Group. We have 3 pillars: full service, full development company, and we run a venture fund as well.
My name is Xiaochen. I speak too much. Yeah.
And I'm Derrek Fahl. As I said, I'm a partner at Miller Thomson. Chen promised we had to be entertaining, so she says that when they work with lawyers or talk with lawyers, her favorite thing is to tell lawyer jokes. And she asked if I had any that were quick, and I told her one, and she smiled, so I'm going to try it with the audience. The joke is, why do you never hear of shark attacks on lawyers? Professional courtesy. And with that, we're going to talk about the token economy and regulation of the token economy. When I speak with clients or people in industry or just the public generally, there's a lot of phrases that get tossed around as buzzwords: tokens and ICOs and blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And more I'm hearing something, the phrase token economy. But like so much in our space, there's really no terms of art that are agreed upon as being defined terms or common meanings across the board. So I'm curious as to what the panel thinks about or what they interpret token economy to mean when they hear it or when they speak about it.
Okay, I'll start. Blair assigned this one to me. So token economy, for economy to exist, you have to be big enough. So we're talking about token, we're not talking about your kids doing something well, you give them a token, then they can claim it for something else. So token economy is mostly related to this ICO, you issue tokens, or whether you do it's ICO or just an internal token. So you use the token to run the organization, to run the economy. That's my take on token economy.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at a token economy in comparison to a regular economy, there's a couple of key distinctions, and I think the one that's the most important is that in a regular economy, the governance is centralized, and generally in a token economy, the governance is decentralized, and I think that's been a lot of the focus sort of in the community, especially over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, is what does decentralized governance look like, and how can it benefit different industries and in different applications.
When I think of a token economy, I think of volatility, to be honest. We're using a different medium of trade that is not necessarily backed by government, so we're trading different mediums of trade for different mediums of trade that all have this volatility around them. So I think you touched on right, we need some kind of economy of scale before we get rid of the volatility with that.
Yeah, and for me, token economy is, you just say token economy with token or economy without token. And the economy without token that we all know we are in. And the token with economy, which means that without token, that we don't have an incentive to drive customers. We don't have a way to track the record or sourcing tracing. We don't have a way to just design smart contract which can just take the intermediary out. So a new token economy means that using a token that we can really transform the old economy, and using token to provide a new incentive to just really transform the old business model into new.
Just to touch on that.
Please,
so
yeah.
when they think about what do companies do, they mostly do 2 things in general. Number 1, sales of product, marketing. Number 2, financing. So with token, you're able to do 2 things at once. So by issuing the token, you're pre-sell your product, and you're also able to raise money through the token. So I think that's a good part of token economy.
Is it fair to say that if there's a common thread to all of this, it's a new method of doing something that we have always done or have always done in business, but better and in a more decentralized fashion. I mean, when I think of token economy, I think of, as you said, companies trying to raise capital to fund their projects or fund their business or sell their products. I've heard, a token economy is the tokens are a means of participation on a network or a form of currency to pay for goods and services. And I was just at a conference a month or so ago, and the token economy was referenced as almost a digitization of property, and that everything that we know in our world that we can touch and feel and carry and take home and drive in and live in and can have really a tokenized existence, and it can be bought and sold and cut into fractions and traded and all of those sorts of things in a token format. And I think all of those things are different variants of a token economy, but all through it, it's a new way to view things and a way to use tokens to create a new, I guess, a methodology or a paradigm, frankly.
Yeah, and liquidity with a secondary market, right?
In time, we all hope. That's actually a very good segue, which is the regulation of what we think of as a token economy. And I see it every day in my practice as a securities and securities regulation lawyer. I'm sure you guys do in your businesses, your professions. Everywhere we go in this space, we are constantly intersecting with regulation of one kind or another. Securities regulation, there's tax, there's no end to it. Can you talk a little bit about the types of intersections you've each faced with regulators or regulations in your work and in your efforts to advance business projects forward? And then maybe a little bit about where you see the landscape going or changing. If you're going to look into your crystal ball and say, a year from now, securities regulation or tax regulation is going to look like this, what predictions would you make?
Lawyer goes first this time.
Lawyer goes first this time.
I have a lot to say about this. Where is regulation going? Well, first of all, we've all deal with this in our daily lives here, which is this security versus utility debate, which everyone has either heard about or is even tired of already. But that is just the tip of the iceberg for me. The real part is going to start when the CRA comes to this. We all want an economy that works. We want the token economy. We want to have this industry prosper. But the best way to stifle this industry is if you're in securities, and we can talk about this, if you're securities and you're ruled as a security for security law purposes, and then you turn to the CRA and you're ruled as a good for tax purposes. And you're in this limbo land here.
Right, and that's not a fictional event.
No.
That's most of what we see.
Most of the time.
Is
So-
that, yeah, securities regulators say, yep, you're a security, you comply with us, do all of the things that make us securities, and then you get to tax time and they say, nope.
So, and I can't emphasize enough that the distinction to become a security for security laws purposes is different than to become a security for tax law purposes. So there's lots of people that will go to the BCSC or whatever the regulator might be and say, okay, great, we were ruled as security, we have some certainty, we know we can keep the money in kind of a form of equity. But that's not the case. You have two different tests that distinguish them both. So the worst sort of gray area you can be in, I can't think of a lot of other examples outside of this token economy that we're talking about that can really rule you as a security for security rules and a good for tax purposes. So what does that mean? You're selling something, you're trying to be a good, but it's speculative in nature. So you're bound by security laws. You have to do all the reporting, the prospectus, all the things a reporting issue would have to do. And then you go to the CRA, it's like, well, this was income now. You might be paying 26.5% taxes. You might be subject to GST and PST. So it's not a good place to be. And lots of people that come to us, everyone wants this utility token because there's less regulations and they think they have a non-jurisdictional raise. But when you take the tax equation into this, I think there's a reason to actually design some of these tokens as a security because it's easier to deal with for some certainty for that. So if you really want to stifle this market, it's kind of the exact characteristics which we have. And it's not the BCSC's fault. I love the BCSC if you're here anywhere. You guys are great. And it's not going to be the CRA's fault either. It's just the right hand's not talking to the left hand. And we have this new kind of product that's sitting in limbo. So if we want to change that, we have to change the playbook. You know, the BCSE is playing by their rule book, the CRA is playing by their rule book. They need to be given a new rule book to be able to deal with these new token economies.
Yeah, and I think those are some great points, and a lot of the focus has been on security versus utility tokens, but I think taking a step back, there's a sort of the bigger picture of innovation that we need to look at, and one of the speakers earlier mentioned that there are pockets of innovation that are popping up in different jurisdictions, and so speaking to Canada in particular, I think there's been steps in the right direction in creating a regulatory sandbox last year, which is focused on fintech, not just crypto and blockchain in particular, but it's meant to educate the regulators and to make sure that they're engaging enough with industry, but it's not a true regulatory sandbox. And I think there's examples in other jurisdictions where there's more sort of support for innovation. And in my view, I think like I said, I think the Canadian regulators have taken a step in the right direction. But I think if they want to, prevent capital from fleeting out of Canada and prevent talent in not just ICOs but in cryptocurrency infrastructure projects from leaving, there needs to be more active steps that are taken, beyond. And I'm sure you would have experienced this in your practice and other lawyers advising on ICOs and other infrastructure projects. Is that going into the sandbox is a really uncertain process, and it's generally sort of 6 to 18 months to go from your initial application to approval. And in this world, that's an absolute killer for innovation. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, the regulatory world's a very different one from everything we do in our day-to-day lives, because the speed of business is light years faster than the speed of regulation. And the focus of regulation, of course, is as long as nobody loses money because somebody did something bad, we're okay. We'll stifle ahead of risk, right? That's it's a protective scheme, and it exists, and then there's no way out of it. And I think, as you said, the sandbox is a really good attempt. The difficulty, of course, is everything that comes out of the sandbox tends to be, at least to this point, a bit of a one-off solution. So here's what we can do for you to make your project work. But for anybody else, any other issuers or companies or participants out there that want to take that and use that as a sort of bright line test or rule of thumb or roadmap, the sandbox hasn't been great at that because they've been very case specific in its applications. And I think, it's probably too much to ask, I think, for tax and securities to come together and create a harmonized type regime. But even from the regulator side, hopefully very soon we see something that provides a bit more clarity on a broad-based basis. Because we all live with regulation in every day in every aspect of our lives, and it's just, if we knew the rules, then we could decide, do we want to play the game here? Do we want to go elsewhere? How do we want to approach our business and try and move our business objectives forward? There's been differing opinions on the purpose or the value of regulation. Obviously, in terms of the innovators and the creators, it's harsh. Is that something, as professionals that work in this every day, how do you feel the strength or the level or the sort of the tenacity that which regulators have come at this? Is it too harsh? How are they in finding that balance?
This is, there are a couple of studies being done globally, and from feedback in different countries, it's really different. In some jurisdiction, and people just intend to think that they need more because nobody want to just operate in a vacuum. And then there's also in space, all jurisdiction that's just too much, and because it's killing the innovation. But when we move back to the token economy, it doesn't operate in a vacuum. And when we talk about token economy, we actually deal with 3 different concepts: blockchain technology, and ICO as a fundraising tool, and the token could be just categorized as asset, currency, or other type of property even. So in this, we are dealing with the existing legal system. And if you're using the blockchain technology to create a solution, do money transaction, that you are actually just dealing with the cross-border transaction, then you have to just comply with the AML regulation. If you're creating a cryptocurrency which is just becoming used as ICO, fundraising, that you have to comply with SEC regulation. And now if you just also just create a solution which it doesn't exist. There's no existing solution which regulation which really deal with it. So that's the sandbox type of innovation policy will play a role. But in general, we have a global trend now. That's when we talk about ICO, that's more and more regulators take ICO as more, or the token as more security that go through the security, the compliance, and also it's more stringent than before, and it's definitely we see the trend.
Ben and Blair, what have your clients been saying to you in terms of their interactions with the regulatory sphere?
I think it's more what I've been saying to them. But this is a slippery slope. I mean, the BCSC has two mandates, which is to protect investors and incentivize or innovate growth. And that balance is different in every jurisdiction. It could be weighted either way, and you have a certain mix that you want to do with that. Now, I heard two great points was investors, economies like certainty, and if they don't have that certainty, they might go to a different jurisdiction. And I'm sure all of the lawyers here get calls every day about same companies in different jurisdictions. And that opens up a whole other set of problems that they haven't contemplated. It's not easy just to pick up and move to Malta or to Gibraltar or to Switzerland. It's not that simple. So what do we want here? I think that we'd still, like I said before, we need a new playbook for the BCSC and the CRA. And how do we get there? How do we get there faster? Well, for me, the companies are here. They want to work here, but they're not coming here to get BC investors. There's a lot of people in here that want to be in blockchain. Is your primary investor base in BC? No, you're here because you want to work with Derrek, or you want the stability of the Canadian economy, our banking system. There's a bunch of things we have to offer. Now, in securities laws, you have to abide by two sets of security laws. Where you launch, so if you launch from BC, you have to go by BC security laws, and where you sell. There's two sets of security laws. So the easiest way for me to think, before we get a whole new playbook about how to legislate this, is let's allow tokens to be launched from BC, and I'm going to beat this drum until it happens, which maybe never. Let's allow tokens to be launched from BC and geo-block BC. Now we've protected our investors. You just have to abide by the laws in the places that you're selling it. Now you're going to start importing jobs, importing the economy here. The investor base in BC isn't what you were chasing anyway, so you get all the advantage of the BC market, but if you want to sell to BC investors, you got to abide by BC laws. And I think Ontario has an exemption that's somewhat close to that. We don't have that in BC. So if we allow companies to come here, launch your tokens, make sure you're abiding by the security regulations of the foreign jurisdictions when you're selling, we've kind of taken an easy exit out of this conundrum we're in.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, to me, again, it really comes back to taking a step back and looking at what the regulators' mandate is and what they're trying to achieve within capital markets. And I think some regulators, like in Canada, have taken the approach of trying to understand the technology and understand what's going on in the industry and then regulate. And we have yet to get to the point of regulate. In other jurisdictions like Switzerland and Singapore, they've taken a more sort of expedited approach, created some clear regulations, and then established a more flexible, a true sandbox where you don't need to go through and fully register or comply with sort of all the all the requirements because they're not known at that time, and instead it's more of a notification process, and they limit the retail exposure. So to your point earlier, it's not opening up this brand new business, so it's going to create risk for a bunch of investors and retail. It's very limited, and so I think for everybody's involved in blockchain and crypto in a different capacity, I'm sure, in the room. But even for those of us that are full time in this industry, it's so much learning every day, and it's so much new, and the evolution is incredibly fast. So I think being able to wait until a point that the regulators get comfortable with what an ICO looks like and what type of protections and regulations need to be in place is pretty unrealistic. And it's the reason why sandboxes were created in the first place. so I think that really needs to be sort of advanced. And Canada's sandbox is very young in comparison to others like the UK and some Southeast Asian countries. And I think it's part of the natural development of a fintech sandbox. But I think there are some sort of next steps that need to be taken.
Thank you. If there's any further final comments from my panelists, we can have them now. Otherwise, thank you all for your listening.
Derrek, panelists, thank you for your time today. I just wanted to remind everybody also that all of the panelists and all the speakers today will be available at the coffee break and also at the cocktail party. So if you have follow-up questions for any of them, as well as I'd like to also point out we have all of our sponsors here on the side. Everybody will be available for conversation at the coffee break and at the cocktail party. So I just want to remind you in case you have any other questions. Thank you, Derrek.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, we're